In this episode on how to be the best dog parent, I welcome Dr. Peter Dobias. We discuss the processes you should go through before getting a dog or puppy and how you can identify the type of dog that may be best suited to you and your current circumstances. We also talk about the importance of giving your puppies the right amount of exercise and how this changes as they get older. This podcast also includes a number of deeper discussions, including the importance of continued learning and the key lessons we can take from our dogs to live a healthier and happier life. But this podcast is about so much more than how to start and raise our dogs in the most natural way possible to optimize their health and happiness. It's about the special bond between dogs and their humans and how much we can learn from each other. I've wanted to speak to Dr. Peter Dobias for years because he's been an inspiration to me for so long. Why? Because he's learned from his veterinary practice what to do and what not to do to optimize our dogs' health and happiness. He's got so many resources and so much wisdom to share. Dr. Dobias also provides so many resources in the form of blogs, free training, and an amazing range of natural supplements to provide our dogs and us humans with the best support possible to cope with today's modern challenges. But what I loved about my talk with Dr. Peter more than anything is that he truly walks his talk. Looking after his own health and that of his beloved packs, he's on a continued journey of learning and sharing to make the world a better place for all dogs and their humans. I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as we did, and please do leave questions and comments below so that I can see if Dr. Dobias would join us for part 2. So sit back, enjoy with an open mind, and stay curious, stay free. Well, I could not be more delighted today with my guest today. So I am going to introduce all my listeners to the amazing Dr. Peter Dobias. Now, Peter, I'm just going to read out your bio first because it's a beautiful bio. Peter has over 30 years of experience as a veterinarian. He has a background in both holistic and conventional veterinary medicine, animal homeopathy, and natural nutrition. In 2008, he sold his thriving holistic veterinary practice in North Vancouver, Canada, to pursue his passion for educating the public about disease prevention and natural treatment methods. His goal is to help dog lovers create a healthy and long life for their canine friends naturally. His supplements and other products are made from all natural human-grade ingredients that are certified organic where possible. And obviously all your links about where people can connect you to will be given below the video. And Peter, first and foremost, I want to say thank you so much for coming and speaking to myself and my audience today, because all my audience are passionate animal lovers, but I have been your biggest fan for almost since you started. And anyone who's ever had a consult with me knows that in their report, they get links to all your information because you have got not only the best natural products for dogs, but also such a wealth of information available for people. So a big, big welcome for me.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I really appreciate it. I think that the work that you do is amazing, that you bring everyone together and also help animal lovers and people around the world. I really appreciate you taking the time and inviting me. And I feel really grateful for being here. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, my listeners are going to get to know you. For those of you that don't already know Peter, you're going to get to know Peter really well today. So we're going to start off getting to know you a bit more, and then we're going to move on to really help everyone who's listening to really have some practical advice for people about how they can start their puppies as naturally as possible. But all of the advice that we're giving today and the recommendations are going to be equally applicable to any dog at whatever age they are, because one of the biggest messages I want to get across is it's never, never too late to make improvements for ourselves and our animals in our care. But what got you into your love of animals, Peter? We're going back to your childhood. Did you always have animals in your life?
Yeah, so I grew up. I'm one of 4 children. I'm number 3. my dad was a veterinarian. He was a conventional veterinarian, and my grandfather was a herbalist. So I've always been able to kind of witness the two different systems. And then the first animal that we had, well, we had several animals because my dad, obviously, he was a vet. So we just kind of, we brought them on. The most memorable ones was our dachshund, who was my fifth sibling, or my dad called her the daughter, his favorite daughter. Actually, I shouldn't say that, but it's true. And then we had a little Vietnamese pig that was rescued, and my mother actually was very fond of him. And I remember one thing. I remember that it was cold, and she needed to warm it up because they're very sensitive to cold. And so I remember that he was close to the oven, but he wasn't in the oven. He was close to the oven, so he's warm. So that's the first kind of experience with animals. And then um, our parents were busy, and my parents were busy, so they put us into a riding club. And I grew up in the Eastern Bloc, and it was very cheap to ride. So it was like an equivalent of $1 every six months to pay, and they had free babysitting. So as when we turned 10, 11 with my younger sister, we basically spent all our times around horses. And it was a great experience, but at the same time, it was also a very painful experience because we saw the horses getting ill. They didn't always get the care that they needed. The stables weren't really nice, and obviously, all the horses were owned by the government organization and so on. So it was very different. But one of the horses, I fell in love. Her name was Alpha, but she wasn't really Alpha. She was just a lovely, lovely, lovely horse. And she had tendonitis. And I witnessed her being ill and unwell. And she also was ridden when she wasn't supposed to be ridden, when she was limping. And I remember the kind of sense of despair over what was happening. So, that kind of made me want to help animals. There's always a story behind it, right? The personal connection. When I went to vet school, I actually didn't get to vet school the first year around, and I worked at the veterinary college. And there I got an experience of the laboratory setting and laboratory animals, and mice and rats and horses and rabbits. And that was very traumatic as well. Like, I still have memories and kind of nightmares of what was going on with the laboratory animals. And I knew that if I basically left that environment, that I wouldn't really be able to help. So I kind of survived somehow. And then you learn, the basics and conventional medicine, of course, and drugs, and how every disease has a protocol. And then you get to the practice, and you realize that many of these drugs actually harm animals, and that they don't really work as well, or they don't work at all. And for one drug that you give, you have to give 3 more drugs to correct the symptoms, that the side effects that these drugs cause. So yeah, so that's and I always knew as a human, as a growing up human being, that natural healing is somehow better. And I saw it with my grandpa. And he was an amazing herbalist, and he taught me about herbs. And I also suffered from very severe allergies when I was a teenager. I was not able to breathe through the nose for 6 months out of the year. So when I was 19, 20, I started kind of looking into different books and started reading. I don't know what made me or who made me, probably the allergies. But I kind of cured my allergies, my hay fever, just through diet and through following some of this advice. And it was really interesting. So, and then I moved to Canada, and everything got canceled. I mean, like, I became conventional again because I had to pass my board exams, and suddenly I was one of the largest sellers of dog kibble in the province, right? Like, I'm embarrassed about it now, but I also want to say to everyone that it's never too late, and we all have our evolution, our process. So anyway.
That's absolutely fascinating. And I can identify with a lot of that. I mean, as a biologist, I was absolutely traumatized by the lab experiments. And at university, I used to get myself into a lot of trouble because I used to sneak back later on and release a lot of the mice and rats into the local woodland. I don't know how many of them survived, but I did get myself into quite a lot of trouble doing that, but it was worth it, and the frogs and things. But I think you've hit on a really, really important point there about that, you know, we all make decisions, because everyone watching this, you know, we live in a society where we can talk for hours about the whys, but where we are almost brainwashed into ridiculous decisions when that light bulb moment goes off to it. So for me, I find it quite fascinating that as a species, we even need nutritionists. Every animal in nature knows how to feed itself. And the beauty of the fact of when you let animals start to make decisions for themselves. I mean, I love herbs. I'm absolutely passionate about herbs and things. I do something called zoopharmacognosy, animal self-medicating. But I think it's important that when people are watching this and we go through the conversation today, that we don't blame ourselves for poor decisions, because when you know better, you do better. And I look back at some of the decisions I've made for some of my animals, and I absolutely cringe. But at the time, I genuinely thought I was doing the best thing for them. So, I mean, your impact of your grandfather being a herbalist, that is absolutely wonderful that in your childhood you had these two very, very diverse but equally important influences on you. And obviously that's had a big impact on shaping where you are now.
It has, and it gave me the opportunity to kind of compare, but I've always been really curious and a little bit of I'm just going to use the word disturber when it comes to, I never really like to follow protocol. So whenever something doesn't work or didn't work, I started to look elsewhere and started to kind of use more common sense. And the healing system that we use now, or I've kind of developed and we call healing cycle, is really simple. And when I talk to some of my clients and my team and so on, we kind of, I'm perplexed. It is so simple. The natural principles of healing are so simple, and it is so surprising how very few people kind of understand it. And I think that what happened with the medical system, obviously it has been hacked, and people have lost the ability to, because we are so used to the status quo that people don't even question when they go to the doctor. They expect the doctor to prescribe some medication. They don't question often enough. And as I'm getting older, I see many of my classmates and friends kind of like being in that mindset because, they don't work in medicine, or they have not had the blessing and opportunity to see what can be done. And it is very painful and frustrating. And also with dogs, like and other animals, you see what is being done to them. And 80%, in my mind, 80% of the medical conditions that we deal with could be either prevented or treated or helped significantly without any use of drugs. And I'm not necessarily saying that it has to be like medication is needed sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'm not one of those orthodox people who say, I would never take any medication, but it can be reduced dramatically. I would say 80-90% reduction is easy. And the problem is that when you see how much money drug companies and pet food companies make, reduction of their business by 80-90% would be an absolute disaster. So the marketing machine and the kind of, we as humans are our mind is open to the messages that are being sent to us, and whatever we are being told, we start believing. And unless we are kind of rebellious a little bit, or curious, or have some sort of life experience that is very traumatic or life altering, and then we go, oh my goodness, this, it has to be different or has to be changed. But we just go with what we are told, and it's frustrating, actually. That's the right word. It's frustrating to see. And at the same time, I know that there are many things that I don't know and will be learning until I drop dead. Hopefully not soon, but there's still a lot of learning to be done.
I think that's the great thing, is this ongoing, every day we can learn and make better decisions. And the beauty I find of those of us that are lucky enough to share our lives with our dog friends or cat friends or guinea pigs or horses, whatever it might be, they're so forgiving, aren't they, Peter? You know, they don't sit there and say, well, I wish you'd found this out a year ago. They're like, thank you, let's all move on. And we have so much to learn from them, from that attitude.
Oh, you know, every time I look at my dog, I go, how is it possible that a species has evolved that far? How is it possible that in so many aspects we should be learning from them and need to learn from them and need to almost copy them in the way they are? I like many things in animals. I love the direct communication of, I'm going to talk dogs. Is it okay?
Yeah.
I love the direct communication. Like, you know, when they're happy, when they're upset, they definitely are extremely forgiving, which is one of the qualities that we humans are having trouble with. And also just knowing what is important in life. You know, hanging out with friends and have fun and enjoy nature. They're just so perfect. Like, it's really hard to, and if they're not perfect, it's often because we humans have messed them up, whether it's through traumatizing them or not allowing them to be animals, not allowing them to sniff other dogs, not allow them to be with other dogs and with their friends. And they suffer, and then they may turn unhappy, depressed, or aggressive. And yeah, I see that a lot. There's so much to talk about.
Oh, there's so much to talk about. Yeah, honestly, there really is. And I think, you know, what we're going to be well, let's get on to the nitty-gritty of when people get a puppy. Before someone gets, whether it's a puppy or an adult dog they're bringing into their lives, what are some of the key things, Peter, that you would encourage people to do their homework on first? Because a lot of people, particularly in the lockdown, I don't know what it's like. I know you share your time between a few different locations, but in the UK, we've had so many people at the start of the lockdowns went out and got dogs, and they knew nothing about how to raise a dog successfully. And so we've had a lot of disastrous consequences from that. So in an ideal situation, we'd encourage people to do their homework beforehand. Where would you want people to start with that?
I think that the first kind of exploration has to start with us. Do we want a dog because other people are getting dog? Do we want a dog because we are temporarily lonely? Do we want a dog because we want to solve some personal challenges and issues? I think that we really need to be ready for parenting, for parenthood. Like, I think that it equals to having a child, even though it's slightly different. I think every dog, every cat, every pet deserves to have a good home. And people think that maybe I get a dog sitter, maybe I get someone else to look after them when I'm going on holidays and so on. It doesn't really work that way. They suffer when they don't have at least 2 walks a day, and I'm just going to say 2 good hours a day plus. They suffer when they're alone. I think there are some solutions to that. If people are working and they can't be at home with their dog all the time, maybe there's an older lady or a gentleman who can take their dog, and they would be, they don't want to have their own dog because they're senior and they're worried that these dogs would be left behind. But there's some solutions. The other thing that I think is kind of important to look at is budget and see whether we can afford to feed our pets well, whether we can afford to either get insurance for them, and I would always recommend insurance, or if not, whether our budget would allow an emergency of, let's say, 5,000-10,000 pounds, because it can happen, right?
I've been there.
Yeah. There's a misperception, and many rescue organizations and many dog shelters misperceive that happy dogs have to have a backyard, which is not true. Dogs are denning animals. They like to be together with their humans and with other dogs. And when they're taken out, they can be in a condo, in a small bachelor suite, and they're absolutely fine. It's more about how engaged they are, how much exercise they get, and so on. So that's one part, just kind of looking at the, at our living condition. And I also recommend people to really inquire whether emotionally they're ready to care for someone else, mentally whether they have the capacity at that moment. They may be going through trauma, which is not a bad thing to get a dog, but they have to be ready to be there for their pet or have a backup in a family, and making sure that the dog is familiar with the rest of the friends in the family. So if something happens, they can step in. Also, last will, it's super important. And I kind of talking about that, but it's super important to have an arrangement for their pet. So all these are thoughts that people should just kind of put on the list and solve. The next one is also whether they choose rescue dog, which is always preferred, or a breed. And some people actually inquire why I got a purebred dog. I tried so hard to get a rescue border collie, and I wanted to get a puppy, and I'll tell you later about that, because we need to train him for, well, I can tell you now, we need to train him for helping me with my sleepwalking, because when I was in my mid-20s, I actually sleepwalked through glass door and almost died. I almost bled out because I got artery on my leg. So every dog that I get needs to be trained in a proper way to turn on the lights, stop me when I sleepwalk or if I sleepwalk, and so on. So we tried to get a rescue border collie puppy, going back to the breeds and rescue versus purebred. We tried to get a rescue border collie, and we found one in Oregon, and I was in Europe at that time. The rescue organization approved us after a week of back and forth, and then they said that they wouldn't reserve the dog.
Wow.
And so I said I would fly, 9 time zones, and then you're telling me that you would not even reserve the dog for me to. And so we basically just found a really lovely veterinary technician who had 3 puppies here. And I said, I can't stand it anymore. It's quite strange how some of the rescue organizations, how inflexible they become, and they forget about the well-being of the animals, and it's more about the rules and bylaws or whatever they create.
Yeah.
They forget about the fact that, someone may not have a backyard, but they are absolutely perfect, or they don't inquire about monetary needs, but it's someone with a house and backyard will get a dog. Recently, and I hope it's okay that I'm derailing, but recently we had an experience where our friends who had a previously rescued dog that we fostered and they adopted 20 years back, amazing dog parents. And we tried to bring a dog from the Rocky Mountains, from Alberta, Canada, to them. And they basically insisted that the whole family, including the son that is at the university, the husband who traveled, and the wife, would arrive on the location, and absolutely this dog will not be, if one person comes, the dog is not going with them. So
I know. I'm so with you, Peter, because I've worked with a lot of rescue organisations, and I do understand the challenges they're under with staff shortages and the burden of responsibility. However, I do agree that there's a lot of devastating decisions being made both ways, where really wonderful home environments are being missed, but equally where dogs with what I would call more special needs, like mine have had, are put with people that just haven't got the experience to do it. So my current, all my animals are rescues, but when I had young children, I had Labrador rescues, and I've always grown up with Labradors. I know the breed incredibly well. They were amazing. I couldn't have had my current 2 dogs, who are absolutely adorable in every way, but I needed to be at a certain stage of both competence and knowledge, but also have the home circumstance where I could give them the secure home needs that they needed. So I do think it's really sad, and it's one thing that I'm really passionate about, is how we can help share this information with rescue organizations to help give them a different perspective of ways of looking at things.
And it's all well intended, and I actually think that people who rescue pets and animals and do this work are incredible, and they're angels in many ways. But you know what happens? Sometimes even the best intention may end up with not the best results, and And we all know that. We all been there.
Yeah.
So, this is not to talk negatively about the process, but it's to actually have a conversation. I'm a big believer that conversation has to happen, and the conversation that is not, that is open, and people listen to each other and try to see their points, and try to exchange opinions, and then eventually it'll end up in a positive way, as opposed to me thinking that we are against each other if we have a different opinion.
It's so important. And for so many people will choose a dog based on looks alone without understanding the needs of, because obviously different dog breeds do live
Yes.
in different environments and do have, and if you're taking on a rescue that's been traumatized, you're going to need to have different tools in your toolkits to deal with that and help the dog settle more. So it is really important that people just get away from just the physical side of things and really understand what they're taking on to become a pet parent.
Absolutely. So going into breeds and fashions and fads and all that, dogs are not, or pets are not a purse. They're not a car. They're not an accessory. And I've seen that. I could name you exactly the decades or the periods where a certain breed was popular, and then it's another one and another one. And these dogs suffer not only from being adopted by unaware people, but also because they usually become inbred and become more disease prone, or they can't breathe because their noses are too short, or their airways are collapsing, and so on. And they have multitude of really serious problems that sometimes ends with very severe propensity to cancer or to shorten lifespan. Many breeds are like that. I love, actually, I think that the best dogs are really mutts when it comes to it, and they can have a certain characteristic. They may be border collie crosses, or they can be boxer crosses, there can be poodle crosses. But again, when our society is so focused on the looks that people like, I think dogs actually came to teach us one more lesson, that we should really focus on our soul and the energy. You know how dogs are drawn to good people, and suddenly they're afraid of someone, and we don't really know why, but they know why. And I wrote a little piece just some time ago about the fact that wrinkles and aging are a sign of happiness, or the looks are really like, they're just, I sometimes feel even strangely not negative, but not as good about the fact that I feel it's unfair, actually, that my dog, because he happened to be nice color and he's happy and so on, and he attracts people because of the coloring, I think, or because of his body language. But it's unfair that some other dogs that have, let's say, that don't have that benefit and the advantage, are not as, they don't get the opportunity to be socialized or be as socially included. And I find it very strange. And I think that it does exist, obviously, in between, among humans, but also it exists, racism does exist in between breeds. And yeah, it's interesting.
It is very interesting to see, because I think the energy of obviously dogs are so sensitive to energy. They can read energy so much better than any human I've sort of known. And in fact, they can pick up how people are responding to them. So if someone's got a cute little fluffy dog running towards them, even if they're really badly behaved, they might react differently to that, to say if they've got a great big pit bull or German Shepherd, and the dogs will pick up on that so powerfully from such a distance. So it's a big thing, isn't it?
It's complicated. I think that we could talk for 3 hours about breeds and what's happening on that level. But yeah.
But doing your research is absolutely crucial, because
Absolutely.
most people completely underestimate the amount of exercise that a dog needs, and a human, to stay healthy, and the type of exercise, because they need to be allowed to move and interact as a dog moves and interacts. And a walk on the harness around the block of a housing estate is not going to do it for most dogs or most humans. Do you want to talk a bit about that, Peter? Because that's crucial again when people get dogs, to understand what they need and how much exercise they can and can't have at certain ages, for example.
Okay. Why don't we just start with the adult dogs first,
Yeah.
and then we move on to puppies, because you wanted to talk about puppies anyway, and what to do after a puppy comes in the house if it's an adopted puppy. So I agree with you 100% that dogs can get enough exercise on the leash. And our society, in many places, I think UK is one of the best places in the
Yeah.
world for dogs. The same in Prague and Czech Republic, very dog-friendly country. Canada is somewhere in between, where the leash laws are so restrictive, where dogs often don't get a chance to be off the leash, and we cannot basically exercise. I mean, yes, some dogs can jog with people. Some people overdo it by trying to make dogs running behind a bike or something, which is really horrible. And the extremes that I've seen is that people actually get their dog to some sort of field road and sit in a truck and drive, and the dog is trying to catch up with them, which is, in my mind, criminal offense. But going back to the leash, so I think that there are several different kind of ideals that I would love to kind of help to implement. And one of them is that every dog and every place has off-leash places, but not these ghettos where there's a fence little area for dogs to misbehave and fight and be dysfunctional. It's more just the parks and the space where they can run. And the other thing is that most people actually don't have a very good recall with dogs. And dogs, so recall can be practiced. There are obviously many YouTube videos and behaviors who teach that. Just having good treats in the pocket and teaching puppies at home to come when they are called is easy, because when they're half a meter away and we call them and give them a treat, that's where the brain starts kicking in and the pathways build up. But when we go out and we try to call our dog when there is another dog there, and maybe there is something in the bushes that they want to smell, and there is so much distraction, it's a really recipe for disaster, because many people start repeating their dog's name or the recall. And what happens when we repeat too much? We get numb and immune to it, right? So our dogs don't almost hear it. And I see that all the time. And eventually it becomes dangerous. The next step is kind of what kind of restraint we use when we have them on the leash. Many people, and I stop people all the time in the park, and I have this little spiel where I kind of praise them for, having a beautiful dog, and then I try to engage them in a conversation about the collar, because I said, hey, did you know that? I don't tell them I'm a vet, but I tell them, did you know that the collar pushes on the thyroid gland right here, and it's super important to protect it, and if your dog pulls, it may, such a beautiful dog, you don't want it to become sick. So often people actually say, oh, I never knew that. And that's something that is not taught in veterinary schools, and it should be. And then there are the next stages where people use the prawn collars or choke chains, shock collars. There are super important structures right here. Vagal nerve starts in the neck, and it supplies the nerve flow, or innervates the heart and the lungs and the digestive tract and all the other organs, kidneys. So when the vagal nerve gets injured, it can create a whole bunch of systemic conditions, and people don't really realize that the collar is actually a cause of many health problems in dogs. So I must say that I put a leash on the collar of my on Pax once when I forgot the harness. And it was like, we went to the restaurant and I put him on the collar, and then I actually took the leash and I kind of like wound it around his body more than the neck, because what if he wanted to say something to someone? So it kind of tells you how important I consider this, because I've seen so many dogs being damaged. And it can be from ear and eye problems to lameness in the front legs, because the nerves for the front leg also come to the front legs and feet, to organ disease, hypothyroidism. All those are caused by the collar. So I do my best to inform people, and maybe people think that I'm a little crazy that I stop dog lovers on the walk. But I think that every time we do that, we actually make a difference. Now, when I come to Vancouver, where I worked and my other colleagues worked for a couple of decades, you almost don't see a dog on a collar.
Yeah.
And when I go on a dog walk and I see that, I go, I wonder whether we made a difference. I don't know for sure, but it makes me feel really good. So the collar and the intensity of the exercise, puppies should play and kind of go for easy walks until the age of 6 to 7, 8 months, and maybe even beyond. So think about it this way: the growth plates are open. When they fall somewhere, or when they get stressed by too intense exercise, let's say we're running in the park and retrieving a ball or a frisbee, they can break their growth plates. They can cause serious damage, and also they can start having some other issues. My first dog, Sky, a border collie that was ball obsessed from very early age, and guess whose fault it was? He started having diarrhea at the age of 3 or 4 months, and nothing worked. Absolutely nothing worked. I was absolutely terrified that we were going to lose him. And it went for weeks and weeks. And then I started to kind of look at some different Chinese medicine approaches and so on. And I realized that the energy pathways and nerve pathways come to the intestines, come from the lumbar area.
Yeah.
He sprained and strained his muscles and probably slipped and slit a few times. And it affected the function of the gut. So now part of the diarrhea protocol in my practice or in my writing is to actually look after the back, or stop doing these exercises that are really intense and injurious. Not saying that dogs should never do it, but some dogs do it for hours and hours a day. So
I would just point out to people all Peter's links are below, because one of the things that I think you are so special is you've raised that connection. Peter has got so many resources on his website. It's an absolute must for any dog parent or dog lover or dog professional. So putting those connections and looking at the deeper links is so important, because it can completely transform the health and happiness of your dog. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you know what it does as well? It empowers animal lovers and pet lovers. It empowers you to understand. Like, I think that my ideal goal is that the veterinary clinics will be there for emergencies and for situations that basically cannot be solved easily at home. But in many of these conditions can be addressed through detox process, through providing the right nutrients, aligning the spine, making sure that the body is functional and strong, especially when as dogs get older. And then there's another kind of phase where we kind of help and support the energy metabolism and the repair functions in the body, which we could talk about as well. But I don't want to hag the conversation too much.
Yeah. So I think, one of the things is we see a lot of people, they get a dog, they haven't really got the time to exercise them properly. And so they think 20 minutes throwing a ball or a frisbee in the park is a substitute for a really good long walk where the dog can move properly, sniff and smell. Absolutely crucial.
It is not, and it's not a natural, it's not sorry, it is absolutely crucial. I was thinking about the ball throwing, that it's not ideal. But I get excited about things. This is what happens. Anyway, it is important to know that dogs need to get as close to their natural mobility and natural exercise and activity. So they would run, maybe they would chase a squirrel, and then they would rest, or they would trot, or they would walk, and then they would sniff and so on, and they would be alert again. They would run after something, but they're not going to do that for 20-40 minutes at a time. The other thing that happens with dogs that are obsessive with balls and frisbees, they have the same kind of symptoms as kids that play a lot of computer games. They become very disconnected, very obsessed. But people think that they actually are calmer when they throw the ball for 20 minutes and 40 minutes. They become more hyper. And often I have clients saying, I've been exercising my dog so much, and I can't really exercise them out of it. What I've seen is that some dogs really virtually almost die of exhaustion by doing these exercises, or they burn out, or they have severe injuries. So there is nothing that will replace a good play with buddies. There is nothing that can replace a walk on the trail, in the park, off leash, or playing, even, playing with our dogs. But there are also some rules about playing, how to play safely. If you play tug of war, you have to let the leash or the toy slide out of your hand, because if you don't, you're much stronger. You can injure your dog's neck. So it's yeah. I have many articles on how to play with dogs and how to exercise dogs safely. All that is on the website. And the website and the articles, they're kind of like almost my release when I see how much needs to be done, and sometimes feeling like I can't really, and my colleagues, we can't do the work only on our own. We need the other lovers and animal lovers to know and understand. So when I write, it's almost like a venting or release of that. I'm just going to call it distress, to see how much people love their animals and how many mistakes they make without knowing. And the most important part is to learn what we don't know. We don't know what we don't know, and sharing the information with each other is super important.
And one thing I would say is I encourage the people that I work with, even if they've only can make time initially to go to your website and read one of the blogs or listen to one of the podcasts a week, everyone can make time to do that. And what I find, Peter, is it takes so much stress off the pet parent as well, because when you start to understand things better, you spend a lot less time worrying about what's wrong with your animal, could do this, because suddenly these light bulbs go off and the right decisions or the best decisions for your animal. And by the way, this all applies to ourselves. When you're learning about all this, you'll learn so much about how to keep yourself healthy as well. But what I love is that people initially, it can seem a bit overwhelming. We're going to come on to diet next. But once you start down that journey, I promise you, it takes so much stress off, because you suddenly get that understanding, and then you can make slight adjustments, which will have a huge impact on your dog and on yourself.
Yeah, it is true. Learning is difficult. The early stages of learning is difficult. Like we all remember, if we, learning how to drive, right, or riding a bike, or learning how to swim, or anything. It's really difficult, and then the brain starts building the connections and circuits, and it just becomes easy. And I agree 100%. Like people who have a few different tools in the toolbox are actually much more happy and confident. The anxiety is reduced, because when your pup has diarrhea, and you know exactly what to do for most of the dogs, because it usually stops after 24, 48, 72 hours. If you know what to do and what to watch for, and if you know when it's an emergency or when it can be dealt with at home, and it's really good. It's really helpful, I think, for most dog parents, or how to treat a wound, or what not to do, how not to make mistakes that we all make.
Yeah, so I think, all of these things, these knowledge building, just deepen your bond with your dog so much more. And it's a two-way thing, and your dog will absolutely love you for it more. So I know we could do a whole series of 6 podcasts on diet and nutrition, but it's something we're both very, very passionate about. So what are some of the main mistakes that people make when they get a dog about diet and nutrition? And what would be your key takeaway for people?
I think that the key problem is that there is no human doctor I know that would say, in order to be healthy, you have to eat processed food. And in veterinary medicine, we have had the unfortunate alliance with pet food companies. And I don't think that it was bad, ill-intended, but we as veterinarians care about the animals, and often we can't imagine that some other entities cannot care about them as much. So we've been brainwashed for generation now to feed kibble. And also the cost of, let's say, fresh food and so on is sometimes high. But the first thing that I would recommend is, if you're getting a dog, feed your dog homemade diet. Feed your dog diet of meat, vegetables, raw bones, which will look after your dog's teeth, and some other healthy table scraps and leftovers. The other thing is that pet food companies made us believe that dogs absolutely must not eat salty food. And suddenly you look at it and you go, okay, so we give salt licks to animals and we eat salt, and suddenly dogs are the only species that cannot have any salt. Like, what is that about? Not saying that we should give them French fries or, on regular basis, or some sort of junk food or chips. But there's so many illogical myths and ideas that were brought to us by pet food companies. I'm not sure whether you know that the first kibble maker was an electrician who basically some leftovers scraps at the port, and he had the idea that he can make dog cakes, and that was, I think it was Hill's company. Eventually it turned into Hill's company. So yeah, I have raw food is definitely my passion, and cooked food is also okay for dogs if people don't feel comfortable. Whenever we look at dogs, we have to think of what they would eat if they weren't with us. And they definitely would not be grazing in a field of wheat. They would not be eating hay. They would not be eating wood chips. They would not be eating any of that. And they would not be adding chemicals and preservatives. There's 37,000 billion chemical reactions happening in the body every second, right? And once you start adding the different chemicals and preservatives and all that to the body, those reactions actually will become chaotic, and that's how disease starts. Beside deficiencies, I have this kind of strange analogy. I imagine that our health is like Jenga tower, the tower where you remove pieces and it topples down. Because if you add pieces, if you make it too tall or too bulky, it'll topple down. If you have pieces missing, it'll collapse as well. So, nutrition is super important, but there's also another problem, that food is not what it used to be. We have very severely disrupted the natural nutrient flow in nature, because if you look in Africa and Savannah, that's one of those places where it still works. The animals graze, and then the herbivores are eaten by the carnivores, and they all go back to the ground, and also the manure and feces and that. But if we transport tomatoes from Spain to the UK, for example, it's not gonna end up in the compost in Spain or in the field. It's gonna end up sometimes in compost in the UK or in the garbage. So we put the most valuable resource in landfills. So I have a composter, electric composter, and I put the food at least in little pots or flowers, or sometimes I take the compost and I put in the garden somewhere, because when this disruption happens, our food becomes very depleted, and farmers don't have the resources to replace these nutrients and replenish them. So that's how I came to formulating supplements and formulas, because I started to see how much difference they make. And I also knew that there was an issue with ingredient quality, with manufacturing. And so I just kind of happened to stumble. Well, I was asked to formulate one formula, and then I suddenly realized that I have to do that. And it's actually one of the most mind-blowing and eye-opening experiences, where, for example, I provide a mineral supplements, how many problems and diseases disappear. I didn't know that it was possible to do it as simply through natural diet, through detoxing and providing omegas, minerals, amino acids, fermented vitamins, and probiotics, and you pretty much are set for preventing most of the health conditions. And it's fascinating. Resources. There are many people who actually teach raw diet feeding. There are some differences, but I would say, someone likes this philosophy, another person likes this philosophy, but it is kind of like in the core and the center. They all meet
exactly.
I have created this recipe maker that people can use for free, and they can create recipes because people wanted me to make recipes. And I said, I don't want to write recipe books for dogs. I just don't want to. Why don't you just create the recipes for yourself and then you share it with others, share them with others. So the recipe maker is really helpful because it talks about the different ingredients and what is good for dogs and what is not, because people sometimes don't know. Can I feed my dog mushrooms? Can I feed my dog cabbage? Can I feed them carrots? Like most of the time when I hear people feed vegetables to their dogs, they say, yeah, I feed my dog carrots, but they don't really know that carrots don't digest as well in the digestive tract of a dog. You
That's
can
what I do, and spend your life studying poo. One of my favorite things is keeping an eye on all the animals' poos. Yeah, many a discussion is had in our household. But no, it's an important point. And your recipe maker is amazing. And what's even more amazing is it's free, everyone.
Thank
So
you.
no excuses.
You know, the whole veterinary medical system, or medical system in general, but veterinary medicine especially, it's a challenge to see it needing to be for profit, because the government is obviously not going to sponsor it. But my idea was that when I sold my practice, I thought I need to create a system where we can give help and medical advice to anyone who needs it without them paying for it. And so it took a little bit of thinking and error and trial, and the early years were really, really difficult. And then with the supplements that make a difference, and at the same time they basically support the service that we provide to the canine, to dog lovers and beyond. So yeah, it's I think everything is possible, but I think that health as a domain should be as free as possible, and that the information and that ideally even the knowledge should be for free. And that's, maybe I'm an idealist, but I think that it could happen that we are more empowered and we don't need the services as much, that become expensive, right?
And I think it's absolutely, you're such a wonderful example, Peter, of when your intention and you're so on purpose with you're so in alignment with who you are and what you want to do. The fact that you've given up a very, very successful veterinary practice to follow what was personally so important to you, and in that process you're helping so many people, is really inspirational. And at a time now where so many people are really re-examining where they are in their life and what they want to do. If anything that the last 2.5 years has shown people is what they don't want in their lives. And this is why I think it's so important to see what you have done. I mean, I was reading, there's a fantastic podcast by Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, and he was talking about the key core pillars of happiness, and it's contentment, control, and alignment, knowing that the person you want to be and who you are one of the same. And you epitomize that so much, and you have made it work. So
it may be your reflection, but I will tell you that it wasn't as easy, right? It's more about finding the life is binary, right? Like you always have to choose left or right when there is a river. And it's more about learning how to feel or sense that something is true and right for us. So on the airplane they say that we should put the mask on first and then help others. And I think that with me, I ended up burned out actually completely because of the the long hours and actually pay that hasn't sustained the holistic practice. The sales of drugs and pet food are actually crucial for the veterinary practice survival. And I didn't do that. So I was always, it was, even though I was busy beyond belief and I was helping, I wasn't able to create a model that was actually completely sustainable. So at one point I actually, well, it was sustainable, but it was a struggle, right? So I thought, okay, how can I make more difference, the same or more difference? And being able to spend some time with my mother and being mobile and doing that. So I started reading a lot of self books. If there's one thing that self-help books, if there's one thing that I would recommend, go through, buy an Audible account or some sort of similar account and listen to books when you're driving, or read books if you prefer reading. But but there's such wealth of information. And through trial and error, I basically realized, number one, I want to do what I want to, what I've been doing, because I love the work. I love it, but I didn't like the format. Things that I had in my life on the list, and the things that I didn't have on in my life I wanted, like freedom and mobility and so on. And then started basically crossing the different things that I no longer could manage, right?
Yeah.
And just, okay, I can do this, but I want to do this, and I want to do this. And as he said, and I really love what he said, it's really listening to our soul. It's really listening about whether something feels true or not. And I think that so many people make decisions on the basis of what others think, or what others want, as opposed to what they really feel inside. And it's I have a male partner. I'm in a same-sex relationship, and I remember my dad, when I came out, he says, "You haven't chosen an easy life for yourself." And I said, "How do you know?" And so it's just like, yeah, we just have to really live true life.
Yeah.
It would be the official one and the other one. It just doesn't work. Like we know so many examples in history, and even in current times, like that, where people just, it's like a dam that cannot be stopped, right? Like it eventually will show up in a disaster life, or drugs, or some sort of mental disease, or whatever else it is. So yeah, it's interesting, and it's constant learning. It's not easy, we live among other humans, right? So it's
I
and
know.
they've been traumatized, and they have their ideas, and and friendships and relationships, and oh my goodness, yeah. So it's we can only learn about ourselves in self-help books, and there's so many podcasts and authors and people who really have amazing insights. And the other beautiful part is that they don't say that they're perfect, and they're really vulnerable and
Yeah.
and humble, and yeah, there's so much to think about.
So much to think about, and I think this brings us back to the fact of what our dogs can teach us, because the dogs are so authentically themselves when we allow them to be, because obviously it can be quite challenging for any species that's got so much intact still with their natural instincts and with big hearts. I mean, anyone who's studied the work of heart maths and sees just how much electromagnetic frequency comes off a dog's heart is really just fascinating to watch. So let me ask you, because there's so much we could talk about, and I'm so hoping I can persuade you to come back, but what are the 3 biggest lessons that you have personally learned from sharing your life with your dogs?
It starts with being yourself, have your heart open, and forgive. And there, I could find many others, but those came, right? So I just,
Oh, that's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And there's so much on Peter's side, on my side. It's about how we can really go into the nitty-gritty. We haven't even got on to the chemicals, the vaccinations, the flea meds. Peter has got some amazing information on that. I've got a lot of information on that on my Vibrant Animal Team playlist. But the important thing is what you've just said there. I think the forgiveness really stands out for me so much, Peter, because our dogs are the ultimate examples in how to forgive from a real soul place and a real place of the heart. And if we can connect with them on that level and really learn from on that, the whole world will shift in front of us.
absolutely. And I think that the basis of all this, I think the basis of all suffering, unless there's some sort of brain dysfunction and disease in some individuals, and we could name a few, I think it's fear, actually.
Yeah.
fear. I think that fear breeds the distrust, the close heart, the all the problems that we deal with actually are fear-based, unless there is some sort of, biochemical neurological dysfunction, which can happen, right? Some people may be lame, others may have a kidney disease, and some people may have a disease of the brain. So it does happen. But I would say that, if we were unafraid and if we were able to just sit down and talk, I think that the world would be so much better. And dogs are, I'm not sure how you feel, but we're probably similar. We kind of are similar in many ways. They're conduits of the love. They're conduits of the understanding. I think that they truly can change the world. And that's why I get so sad and kind of upset when I see certain people just not liking dogs and they don't know how amazing they are. And maybe they've had a negative experience with those dogs who were not fortunate and they're aggressive or they have behavioral issues. But dogs as a species, I believe that they've come to save us in many ways. Yeah. How do you feel?
I 100% with you. I think, it's such a gift. And my passion, and I know you share this passion deeply, is to make sure that gift is very two-way, because I think it's absolutely imperative when we both get as much what we're aiming for when you're sharing your life with any animal, but today we're talking about dogs, is that both sides of the relationship get just as much out of it as the other. And my wish to all the humans watching this, I'm sure there'll be a few dogs listening in as well, is that every day, my favorite t-shirt I normally wear, Peter, is "Be the person your dog thinks you are." And I love wearing clothes that, embody the intention that I'm putting out into the world today. And I think just ask, watch, tune in with your dogs. Let's see what they're telling you, because the biggest gift I think they give to us is that always have got our best interest at heart. So they're going to help us lead the most healthy, happy, fulfilling lives. And when we're in that space, then we're in a place where we can make better decisions for ourselves and for any, whether it's two-legged, four-legged, winged, scaled, creatures that we're sharing our lives with.
That's beautiful. I agree 100%. 100%.
Now, Peter, one of the things I really want to leave people with is your supplements are just absolutely wonderful. You've done a brilliant podcast video. You can tell us where it is on your natural flea and tick treatments, which is fantastic. So I'll put the link to that under the podcast, because that's a must for any dog listener. But what countries are you able to ship your products to?
Well, right now, currently, most countries, the products can be shipped to most countries. We've been working on the United Kingdom process, and COVID has stalled everything. So we're actually getting back to the process and trying to see how we can get it to the UK as much as we can. I'm always very humbled, and when people talk positively about our products, and I'd say, and I don't like talking about them, even though I know it's a disservice to some of the dogs and also people, because we have a dog line and a human line now. But yeah, read the reviews and testimonials on my website. See what others think, and if you have any questions, you can always email us. You can get the products in the UK, but it'll still go through the customs. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. People can sometimes, the UK is actually a very unique place. I have many of my former clients, when I was practicing even long distance in consulting, many of my former clients are there. And I think that the tradition of looking after pets and being amazing pet lovers and caring for the animals is greater than almost anywhere I've been. And I'm going to do my best to actually make it available as soon as I can. And Yeah, I would like to thank everyone for being such good animal lovers and people who care and understand. Because those who don't understand and those who think they don't like animals or dogs, horses or cats, they just don't know they love them.
Yeah,
They just don't know they love them.
absolutely. I cannot tell you how much I've loved that conversation today, and I know our listeners will as well. I will make sure I keep all our listeners up to date about, where and when they can get your products, connect with you. All your links will be below. And I would say Peter's team as well are really, really efficient and really, really helpful. So if it's not obvious when you go on the website for the supplements, because the supplements are an absolute must for the dog lovers, and also you've got a human range. And what I really, really love is I love your natural flea and tick prevention products as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out with the contact us form to Peter's team, and they should be able to help you. Is there anything else you want to leave our listeners with before we say goodbye? And I'm really, really hoping I can persuade you to come back.
You know, I always try to listen to what comes before I say something. And the first thing that came was give your dogs and other animals a hug for me. And they need it and we need it too. So thank you so much. Thanks for having me here, Catherine. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I hope we'll be in touch and thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.